Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live session. This is the first in a series of Facebook Live events that we are having from the Animal Production and Health Division. We do look forward to your joining us in future sessions, and we hope that you encourage other people to join. And in future sessions, there will be a number of other veterinarians discussing various topics in livestock management. I am Anne-Marie Philip Hussein, and I am the veterinary officer for St. Patrick, and my topic today is on animal smuggling. Okay, so you'll see on your screen a number of pictures. On my left, you will see some animals on a beach. These are animals that were smuggled in. And then the other pictures, you'll see some carcasses, and there's a picture on my right, bottom right-hand corner, of some smuggled animals, that sheep and goats that came in. So exactly, you would want to know, well, what exactly is animal smuggling if you've never heard the term before? So a couple definitions of animal smuggling. It is a process or act of taking animals to or from a place secretly and often illegally. It also could be to import or export secretly, contrary to the law, and especially without paying customs duties or other duties imposed by law. And these smuggling activities are usually done without import and health permits or health certificates. On your screen, you will see some pictures. There's a boat there with carcasses inside of it, and to the right you will see a half of a carcass of a smuggled carcass. So that gives you a picture of what we see. Again, two pictures of boats with live animals, some sheep, but mostly sheep and a couple goats. These were actual illegal importation that came into the country. Right. Again, this is a recent one, smuggled zebu type cattle that came in. And you can see the position of these animals. Smuggled animals are not treated really nice. They're tied up, or hog-tied as we call them, and they're put into boats in such a manner that it is an animal welfare issue, really, the way they are transported. So you can imagine those animals, how uncomfortable they could be. Okay. Another picture on my left on the screen, you'll see some wild animal carcasses. There's a goatee there. And on the right, you'll see some sheep, and the picture with the sheep, if you notice the middle animal there, just below the lower jaw, there's a lesion. So that just shows you some of the types of things that you see, the potential for diseases entering into Trinidad and Tobago. Okay. Another picture here of some smuggled birds and parrots, and if you look at the animal's chest or breast area, you will see how poor in terms of the feathering. And on my right, there's a young parrot, and the feathering is very poor as well. But you can see these animals are very stressed out. Again, monkeys. This is a very common thing we see in Trinidad. A lot of monkeys coming in, and you can see the type of container in which the monkeys are in. They don't look very happy. On the right, you see the other monkey there, and it's in an enclosure with wire. And sometimes these types of wire may be rusty, and these wires can harm the animals or even the people who are bringing them in. So now I want to talk a little bit about the effects of animal smuggling. Livestock production, as we know, is a very important and essential agricultural activity in Trinidad and Tobago. In order for us to maintain a food secure nation, we must not only focus on food production, but we must be able to safeguard our industry from the introduction of exotic disease. And you might ask, what is an exotic disease? What is a disease that is not common to Trinidad and Tobago? You don't see it. Right? So we don't want introduction of these types of diseases. As we all know, and for those of you who are logging in, new and emerging disease threats have the potential to decimate our livestock industry, as well as threaten the health and the welfare of our citizens. And this is becoming more of a nightmare with indiscriminate smuggling of livestock and wildlife and their products or its products into the country. Our proximity to our twin island republic to South America, as much as 7 miles in some areas, and the lure of huge profits has spawned a thriving trade in livestock, in wildlife, and meat products. And because of the fact that we have porous borders, there continues to be a thriving trade within the last few years. Even though in the law there are designated ports of entry, there are many areas around the country where livestock and its products are brought inland. Animals, primarily sheep and goats, cattle, buffalo, make their way to farmers and butchers. Wildlife and pet animals such as reptiles, dogs, cats, monkeys, birds are brought in for the illegal meat and the illegal pet trade, and they make their way to pet shops and homeowners. So the horrifying picture really is when animals and animal products are illegally brought into the country. Currently, we do not have a quantifiable data to use as a base, like how much has come in. If we don't know, it's difficult. We have had reported cases of animal to human transmission from these illegal activities, but we have not had medical proof to substantiate these claims. Due to the high demand of the illegal imported products and the live animals, the short-term economic gain to people or individuals engaged in these activities can lead to long-term economic disaster to the entire livestock industry. The threat of invasive viruses and pests such as foot and mouth disease, African swine fever, these are some diseases that are exotic and we find them in other parts of the world, and the real threat of other predatory or opportunistic species that can also be carriers of diseases can have detrimental effects on our local livestock as well as our indigenous wildlife. Major concerns is the real possibility of the introduction of diseases such as foot and mouth disease, other cutaneous or skin type and vesicular diseases, diseases like anthrax, diseases like Newcastle disease in poultry, tuberculosis, avian influenza or bird flu, and other zoonotic diseases that can be transmitted to man. And you may ask, what is a zoonotic disease? A zoonotic disease really is a disease that can be transmitted from man to animals and animals to man. So such diseases, if they enter our industry, the economic costs associated with control, with management, and or eradication is exorbitant, much like the pandemic we're experiencing now. The costs of the countries in the world is very expensive. And the effects of trade within the CARICOM region, like CARICOM, and other international trading will be negatively affected. So you see so many different effects of animal trade, and you just think maybe, we could just bring a few animals, but it's not that alone. It has widespread effects from smuggling. I want to talk a little bit about smuggling and welfare of animals, right? Most of these smuggled animals, be it a pet, be it a livestock, be it a bird, they're usually in very poor body condition. They're usually dehydrated because they're coming across from waters secretly, so obviously they hide them in all kinds of, ways. So these animals are dehydrated, are very stressed out, and some of them arrive dead or dying on arrival. And many of these animals, especially the livestock ones and the wildlife carcasses, they end up in the meat trade, right? So if there is improper meat handling, so do you imagine an animal that has been slaughtered and put into a bag and it's in a boat coming across? Handling and storage is not always the best in terms of the cold chain. This is a worrisome concern in the illegal trade, and it's of public health importance because you don't know how the meat was handled and how it was stored, and then it arrives at the destination to be sold. So there could be many areas where contamination could occur. And so this is of public health importance because people can use the meat and they can get infected, right? Welfare though is very important because in managing animals and because of the secrecy involved in bringing these animals across, they do not get proper care before transport, during transport, and on arrival at the various destinations. So I know welfare is a big concern worldwide, so I wanted to talk about how smuggling and welfare interacts. All right. The law with respect to smuggling and welfare of animals. Now, our law is which we are guided by in animal production and health with respect to disease and importation, is the Animal Disease and Importation Act, Chapter 6702. Now, this act was amended in 2020 but has not been gazetted. But it provides certain guidelines with respect to welfare. That's why I'm speaking to it. That the owner or person in charge of an animal must provide this animal with a sufficient and suitable diet. This animal should have access to sufficient and clean water, should have proper housing or shelter, which are appropriate for the animal behavioral patterns. The animal should be reasonably sufficient. The conditions should be reasonably sufficient to protect the animal from unsuitable weather conditions. So imagine this animal coming across in a boat. They're not getting any of these so-called welfare concerns. They're not being treated properly, right? So the animals could be at risk of death or injury from flooding and other natural disasters. You want to ensure that doesn't happen. The animal should have veterinary care when needed to treat and to prevent suffering and disease. It should have suitable accommodation during transportation. And I'm sure the pictures I've shown before, with the animals packed, very, very well packed into the boat, sometimes as much as 40, 50 animals in a boat. So these animals are packed and they're uncomfortable. They're not being given particular care and attention. The animal should be humanely treated and human care and treatment. And no owner or person in charge of an animal shall permit another person to cause the unnecessary suffering or death of an animal. So you realize if we're having smuggling, there is an unnecessary suffering of an animal during transport or secret transport. So this has been addressed in the new law that is not well gazetted as yet, but it is important that the welfare of animals is looked into. So I turn now to livestock production. With respect to smuggling, farmers and members of the public who want to engage in the rearing of livestock should pay particular attention to the source of their livestock. Animal health and veterinary personnel should also be aware of the risks associated with illegal importation of livestock and livestock products. So it is then critical that all our stakeholders be vigilant and pay attention to some of the concerns raised if our fledgling livestock industries to survive. I can tell you that a lot of small farmers have purchased animals believing to have gotten a deal, only to realize that these animals soon become ill, infect their herd, and then they now have to bear the cost of treatment and or eradication of the disease. So they say they get a deal. We Trinidadians like to say we get a deal, right? And we buy 10 animals, and rather than isolate the animals before they bring it into the herd or put them in quarantine in a separate area, they put them with the whole herd, and then the whole herd gets infected over time, sometimes depending on the disease within 7 to 14 days. I want to show you some pictures here of animals that were smuggled in and some of the lesions. To my right, you would see a lesion just above the hoof, a small little lesion there, and on the other side where you'll see a lesion on the gum. Some of these lesions can have risks of humans getting infected, all right? So just to show you some pictures there, all right? This is another set of pictures of smuggled animals, and on the left is a goat, but if you look at the mouth, you would see lesions just under the nose, just above the upper jaw. And on the right, the three sheep there, you'll see lesions there as well. So this shows you what can come in if you purchase an illegal animal or a smuggled animal. And for those who are thinking of bringing it in, what you can bring into the country to, challenge our national livestock herd. So I just want to talk a little bit about a zoonotic disease. I talked about it earlier, but what is a zoonotic disease? It's really a disease that can be transmitted from animals to man and vice versa. And you see somebody's hand there, and on the finger, the index finger, you see some lesions there. And this is a lesion that can be acquired from interacting with an animal with off also known as sore mouth or contagious exanthema. And we have seen this particular disease in Trinidad and Tobago in our small ruminant population, primarily sheep and goat. So just imagine if you weren't aware of that, you didn't wear gloves, and you interacted with an animal that had this problem, and you start seeing a little boil, and then it spreads and it becomes a bigger lesion. You get it unknowingly because you did not know some of the um, problems that you could face with animals with that. And this is just one small example of a zoonotic disease that can affect man. I turn now to the national herd. Another aspect of smuggling, which is critical to us, is that the breeds that are being brought in, particularly the cattle breeds, are not typical breeds that we would rear over the years in Trinidad. Examples of such breeds that we are seeing now is the Cebu, the Nelore, the Criollo, and Brown Swiss. These breeds are typically reared in South America. And some of these breeds can be temperamental. That is, they may not be docile. Although some, for example, you bring in an animal that's smuggling like a Cebu bull. If it's brought in as a baby, it might be docile because you can manage it. But at the end of the day, when this animal is brought in as an adult, it will not be easy to manage. And so we are seeing a lot more of this type of breed coming in. Typically, Trinidad and Tobago, we'd have breeds, especially dairy breeds, Holstein, Jamaica Hope, and Jersey. These are the ones that over the years, and their crosses, are predominant in the dairy industry. So if we have crossbreeding with the newer breeds that are coming in, being smuggling, there will soon be a change in national herd. And that is a concern, a really big concern. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of some breeds that we have been seeing. The animal that is lying down is more typically a zebu. And the animal to my right, which is the one I'm standing up, a really lovely white color animal, the long ears, and there's a hump. And zebu typically has humps, but the Nelore, this is a Nelore, and this particular animal has a hump just on the neck area, and you see a fold, a heavy fold just under the by the neck there. But you notice if you look at it carefully, you would see the face is rather thin. Okay, so this is two of the breeds that we are seeing currently. And this is another one. This one is a Cebu type animal. And these are some that we have seen again. If you notice the animal on the right, there are three of them. The dark colored and the face is almost black. This is typical of the brown Swiss, and you're seeing some other mixed breed in there. All right, so these are some of the breeds we are seeing and finding in the country. Right. I want to talk a little bit about the law. You need to know what smuggling and, of course, how the law relates to it. So as I said earlier, the Animal Disease and Importation Act, Chapter 67.02, which is the law by which we operate in animal production and health. This is an act that makes further and better provisions for controlling the importation of animals, birds, reptiles, and insects. And it also regulates the treatment and disposal of animals which are suffering or which are suspected to be suffering from any disease. And this act contains of two main parts: control of disease suspected or infested animals and importation. So the part of the act that talks about control or disease suspected or infested animals, this part of the act gives the veterinarian the authority to act when the disease is suspected. It also gives you measures for treatment of animals and their surroundings, and the animals could be destroyed or quarantined. The act speaks to that. And then the act also speaks to importation. And this is the part of the act that gives authority to state veterinarians to regulate the entrance of animals into Trinidad and Tobago. This act states that animals may not enter our country without a license or import permit issued by the chief veterinary officer. So some of the importation regulations are made and instituted, and these prohibit, restrict, control, or regulate the importation of landing of animals, carcasses, semen, bones, hair, hides, feather, litter, dung, and biological products. So you ask, what is a biological product? Well, a biological product includes hormones, vaccines, sera, toxin, antitoxin, antigens intended for use in veterinary practices. And this act also provides establishment of quarantine stations and for animals to be placed in quarantine in accordance with the act, or regulations may be made or licenses granted. So this is within the act and in respect to regulations in terms of importation. So within the act, there are several schedules, and these schedules speak to countries from which animals can be imported, right? There are 10 schedules, and from second schedule to the 10th schedule, it defines which countries, second to the 9th schedule talks about the countries from which animals can be imported. So the 4th schedule within the act relates to countries from which sheep, goat, pigs, and cattle can be imported. And these countries are identified on your screen: Anguilla, Antigua, Ireland, Canada, Grenada, Puerto Rico. So I'll just speak into some of them. So these are the countries from which these animals can be imported. And that's the 4th schedule. Then I'll draw your attention to the 7th schedule, and this schedule really relates to countries from which frozen, chilled, cured, pickled products and carcasses can be imported. And you can see the countries there, right? The only South American country there is really Uruguay. So that gives you an idea of, in terms of permits, the countries for which permits can be issued. And finally, if a country is not under a particular schedule, animals cannot be imported from that country. And if you want to import an animal from a country in a particular schedule, there are two main documents that are required for importation of animals. One is an import permit, and the other is a health certificate. However, with certain species, exotic species, for example, lions, giraffes, camels, certain birds, a CITES approval must be given by wildlife. So before a permit could be issued for this, for example, a lion, wildlife must give a CITES approval. And CITES really is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, to which we are signatory. And that wildlife is what you call our management authority for CITES. So once they give approval for that, then it comes to the chief vet office, and then the permit is looked into, but only for these type of exotic species. The permit, again, which is issued by the chief vet, also states what diseases the animals must be tested for, or vaccinated against, or free from before entering into our country. And just a few examples. For example, if you're bringing in a dog from, say, the US, you need to have a test for heartworm and rabies. For horses, you'd want to say they're free from equine influenza. Sheep, goats, and cattle, foot and mouth disease is one particular disease that you want to be sure that they're free from. Poultry and exotic birds, avian influenza is one of the diseases that you want to make sure that, that country does not have. Okay, or it's free from, the birds are free from that. So this gives you an idea of what happens in terms of issuance of a permit. So the health certificate, which is another aspect in importation, this health certificate that is given by the country of import, it states that the state veterinarian in that country has examined the animal. It states that the animal is free of symptoms of diseases such as infectious and contagious diseases. Or it will say, well, okay, certain vaccines are updated and the required vaccines are done. For example, in the United States, the country, the authority is the USDA. So they would be, a state veterinarian would issue a permit for an animal, say, coming in from the US. So I hope that helps. All right. Now, just to talk a little bit more about the role of wildlife division. We, as a ministry, we interact with other divisions and other entities, other ministries, and they have a role in what we do with respect to smuggling. So wildlife division is given authority under the Conservation of Wildlife Act to protect the wildlife in the country. So, for example, if persons are found in possession of animals protected by the Act, there are many penalties. So if a smuggled, say for example, a smuggled bird comes in and they're keeping this bird in an undersized cage, a fine of $2,000 is what is the penalty. Fine for keeping monkeys, especially, you know, is $5,000. And of course, there are also fines for environmentally sensitive species, for example, the scarlet ibis. The penalty is up to $100,000 per feather or 2 years imprisonment. So just to give you an idea of wildlife's role in terms of smuggling and the penalties, some of the penalties that could help. I'm sure wildlife could also expand on this at another time. The role of customs. Obviously, if you have smuggling, you'd be trying to evade customs fines or customs duties. And customs are given the authority under the Customs Act to regulate the transfer of goods into and out of the country. So the main role for customs with respect to smuggling and their interaction with animal production and health is the prevention of smuggling of animals. And certainly there are fines for that as well, so I'll speak to that next. The penalty for an offense of smuggling under the Customs Act is, for the first offense, $25,000 or treble the value of the goods, whichever is the greater, and imprisonment for 6 months. For the second or subsequent offense of $100,000 or treble the value of the goods, whichever is the greater, and imprisonment for 1 year. So you see, not only animal production and wildlife has a role to play, customs is also part of that role. They also share that with us. And then we collaborate together with a number of issues related to smuggling. With that, I'd like to say to you, I hope that this talk that I've had with you guys and all those out there listening, that we can, you know, that it would have been something that you would have learned something from. And I now want to ask you if you have any questions. We will answer questions now at this point in time. Thank you for your time. Just give me a few minutes to answer these questions.
It's in order, right?
Yeah.
Phase one to be
Mhm.
last.
The second one is not on my note. You're here, right? Okay. Let's put it on mute. Okay, well, welcome back. I am going to answer questions by Randy Neil Sohan. Mr. Sohan, you asked what can the Ministry of Agriculture do to make animals available for farmers so that nobody will support animal smuggling. Both, we have three multiplication unit in the south region, depending on where you are. We have one at the penal demonstration station, one at the Cetus breeding unit, and one at the Mayara breeding unit. If you're interested in having an animal or getting an animal to rear, you can go to any one of the three units, the multiplication units, and let them know that you're interested in getting an animal. And they will call you and they will visit you to ensure that the place that you're going to rear the animal is suitable. They will give you guides or give you guidelines as to rearing. And you can find their numbers on the ministry's website. For penal, it's the 647-4672. You can call that number and we will guide you. So I hope that will help you. There's also Centennial Livestock Station where animals are sometimes disseminated to farmers, so you can apply there. But if you're from South, there are three areas. So I'll just reiterate: penal demonstration station, the Cetus breeding unit, and the Mayara breeding unit. Okay. Raquel Balde, you asked about what about rabbits? Is it the same for other livestock, re the legal importation? Yes, it is. If you're interested in bringing in rabbits, you apply to the Animal Production and Health Division, the Office of the Chief Vet. It is located on Abercrombie Street, Port of Spain. The number there is 625-5997. You can call in and let them know that you're interested in importing rabbits. And in terms of getting the permit, they will explain the process to you. Also on TT Connect, if you go on TT Connect, you can also request a permit as well. But I suggest you call the division and ask about it. With respect to Natasha Nunez, how often does the ministry inspect livestock farms and what are the standards required for the health and welfare of the animals? Okay, with respect to livestock farms, I'm not sure if you mean inspect them as a normal course of events or if you have a sick animal. If you have a sick animal, the Animal Production and Health Division, what we do is you call into the various animal production and health offices, the veterinary offices. If you have a sick animal, we do a subsidized service for farmers. You call in and you say what is wrong with the animals, and the veterinary services staff will come to you. If you're talking about, let us say you wanted to, just want a herd health, somebody to visit, we also do that. You can call and let us know. If we have to inspect a livestock farm, it may be that there is a request for, maybe you want to import something, and the veterinary officer for the various counties, depending on the county you're in, will come and visit the farm. So I hope that answers your question. If it is that you ask what are the standards required for health and welfare of animals, well, the new act does define some areas with respect to welfare, and you can also, with respect to the health, we can answer that question in terms of the managing an animal on a farm, be it poultry, livestock, etc. Okay, and Mr. Gian Ducanti, you would like to know how can we get the regulations as to the proper specifications for habitat for birds and animals. If it's wildlife, you can interact with the people at the Wildlife Division. They have standards that they can share with you. If it's animals like livestock, sheep and goats, any veterinary office or livestock officer will be willing to guide you as to spacing requirements, how you build the pen, that sort of thing. So I hope that answers your question. Folks, I'm not done. I'm holding on to answer another question, so just bear with me.
This is from Johan Kurt.
Oh, Johan, okay.
Sure, we're just looking at feedback.
Okay, Joanne Caruso, I'm going to answer your questions. You asked what are your major challenges faced as a VO in dealing with this issue, and have you met these challenges? Well, I can say that it has always been a challenge dealing with smuggled animals, both from a welfare point of view and also from the risk of diseases. It is a challenge for veterinarian. Within the last 6 years, we have had to deal with many issues of illegal importation. It does take a toll on you as a person because, you know, in terms of the emotive part, you know, how you feel about it. But always remember that the risk to the livestock population in Trinidad is at the forefront, and that sometimes you have to do what you have to do, right? I would say that the major challenges really is the security aspect of dealing with, you know, the perpetrators, for want of a better word. That is an important aspect to it. And, you know, I would say that we have had very good support from within the ministry whenever we needed to deal with a situation. It has always been very prompt, and it does help us a lot. But challenges would, I would say, basically security, and the fact that, you know, we need to have a little more security in terms of the borders as well. Timeliness in getting to the various areas where you have to deal with smuggling issues. So those are some of the challenges, and I would say that I would have met most of them, and happy to say that the support from customs and Coast Guard has been very important, even wildlife for certain situations. You ask also what additional legislation may be required, if any, to support my work. Well, I'd like to see the new app become gazetted so that we can deal with the various issues and challenges we have. Because if animals are seized, we have to relate to the old act, because the new act has not been gazetted as yet. Other legislation, there may be a few more, but I would think in terms of wildlife, they are supportive of us in some of the things that we do in terms of carcasses coming in. I can't really at this moment say anything specific that I'd want, but maybe when I have a think tank, I will let you know. But thanks for the support, Joanne. I'm happy that a lot of my colleagues out there are supporting this Facebook live session. Any other questions? Well, that being it, I'm thankful to the people who have logged on, and please tune in. There's another one, sorry, yeah, there's another one.
Same apply here.
Yes. Right.
Let me just call the business name.
Oh, Mr. Lucanti, you asked about how do you go about getting a permit. You get in touch with the Chief Vet office at Abercrombie Street. You can actually go in person, or you can call 625-5997, or you could go to TT Connect and send your request. So basically, an import permit is issued by the Chief Vet. So that is what you would have to do if you want to get a permit. Okay.
Great job.
Thank you very much, everyone, and please tune in next Tuesday when we have another presentation.
Hold on.